Well, hello there, watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time to see what's making the headlines with The Guardian's deputy political editor, Jessica Elgott, and Harry Cole, the political editor at The Sun. Welcome to both of you. As ever, let's check out the front pages, shall we? Starting with the Eye, which leads on the Prime Minister facing a formal inquiry by Parliament's Commissioner for Standards, following allegations that he may have failed to declare the shares his wife holds in a childcare agency that was given a boost in the budget. That story is also on the front page of the Metro, the headline, "Surely some mistake, PM." And on the front of The Guardian, which also reports on energy suppliers agreeing to a ban on forcibly installing prepayment meters in the homes of customers over the age of 85. The Financial Times reports on the Russian opposition activist Vladimir Kara-Murza being sentenced to 25 years in prison. That's the picture story, at least at the top. The Daily Mirror leads on the father of Stephen Lawrence. Oh, that's the Daily Express, do apologise. Reasons to be cheerful. The economy is on the mend, the paper tells us. And let's show you the Mirror there. Confess or never go free, Neville Lawrence's warning. And the Star has the headline, "To boldly go where no visually challenged man has gone before," reporting that a lack of gravity causes eyesight problems for astronauts. Well, a reminder, by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us or our guests. So let's head straight to Jessica Elgott and Harry Cole. And kicking off, Harry, with the Sunak under investigation story making the lead of a number of newspapers. What's his defence? What's the claim? What happens now?
Well, you remember in October when it was that Rishi Sunak stood on the steps of Downing Street and said there'd be a new broom, accountability, transparency at every level. Yet 6 months later, he hasn't published the ministerial list of interests, which he claims he did declare all of his wife's business links in. Now, they'll be kicking themselves in Downing Street tonight a little bit, I think, because they've tripped up here. I don't think this is exactly Watergate. I don't think this is exactly going to really, I don't think anyone really thinks, not least Tory MPs, not least Labour MPs, not even the people probably who reported Rishi Sunak over this, that his wife is, on the take, that, he's in politics to make lots of money. The Sunaks have an incredible amount of wealth. But this just does feed into a slightly hubristic, I'd say, attitude that Number 10 seem to have once again to basic rules. Now, Rishi Sunak, when he was before MPs, just last month, basically was talking about this childcare companies that were going to get additional money thanks to the budget to help try and recruit more childminders into a struggling industry. Now, at that time, he was given the opportunity by a Labour MP who knew exactly what she was doing, Catherine McKinnell, who said, "Do you want to tell us anything, by the way, anything you want to get off your chest about childcare companies?" And a slightly nervous Sunak laughed and said, all my declarations are declared in the usual way. Now, yes, Number 10 are saying they declared it at the Cabinet Office, but he hasn't declared it to Parliament. Now, it's a bit of a grey area about what you're meant to declare to Parliament. Your own financial interests as an MP, yes, but should you declare interests of your spouse? Number 10 are saying, well, no, that is not relevant. It's only relevant to his interests as a minister. But an unfortunate predicament for the man who promised to be a new broom to be yet again under investigation, not long after, again, another slip up with a seatbelt where he got another fine, and he was caught the other day not walking his dog with a lead in the park. And you just think, if you're going to promise to be Mr. Rules and Mr. Transparency, Mr. Accountability, you've got to get the basics right. And it's a bit of an own goal here.
Yes, you say yourself, high standards. The trip up is quicker, to be fair.
Yeah,
but I guess there's all sorts of elements about this. Has she got a stake in the company that he should have known about? Is it part of a fund? Blah, blah, all of this sort of stuff. But the Metro, with a bit of a play on the maths push that he had today, surely some mistake, PM. Sunak announces plans to make all children learn maths, and then he investigates over a failure to declare wife's shares. So they're quite enjoying the juxtaposition of these two.
Yeah, and on all of it, and as Harry said, just comes across as a bit hapless. It's a prime minister who was fined by the police for turning up a bit early to a party during COVID, which he was never really meant to be at in the first place, and fined for not wearing a seatbelt, which he posted himself on a video. So, I think this as well feels like something that could have been avoided quite easily. If the declarations had been done in a timely way. Number 10 will say that that the declarations should only generally be made once or twice a year, but we've had 3 prime ministers in the last year and a lot of different ministerial posts, so you'd expect it to have been done a lot sooner than it has done. And the only way that we can know about these things and these interests is if people declare them, and therefore it's transparent. That's the whole purpose of it. Sunak today was really kind of trying to move the agenda onto something a lot more kind of long-term, ambitious, talking about extending maths to 18, and even that felt a bit flailing. It felt like he wasn't exactly sure how it was going to shake out that this maths to 18, whether it's going to be a qualification, whether that's going to mean people doing sort of exams in pure maths, or whether it's just going to mean working out how to do your tax return. He had to admit that obviously the UK would need a lot more maths teachers, in order to fulfil the ambition. And he gave the speech at a school in Islington, and only one of the students there wanted to ask him a question about it. And before, there was a few more awkward questions on maths teaching from journalists, and then on to the strike. So it hasn't been the best day all around for Rishi Sunak.
Yes, and probably legitimately people saying, why aren't you prioritising strikes, including striking teachers, rather than these long-term aims, which no one else seems that fussed about? But on the other matter, Labour sniffing an opening here, because wealth during a cost of living crisis equals, they think in voters' minds, being out of touch. And that will also always be the problem for Rishi Sunak, won't it?
Yes and no. Actually, there's been interesting focus groups and polling that's been floating around the last few weeks, actually, that actually amongst undecided voters, that actually, because it's sort of counter sort of narrative, because he is so rich and because his wife is so rich, that actually people think that Sunak's in the game for the right reasons. You wouldn't think that would be the public reaction, but that seems to be sort of shining through a little bit in some polling and some focus groups. Now, Labour are determined to paint him as out of touch. They think they've got an open goal. He's the guy that wears the Gucci loafers to a building site. He's the guy that fills up his 600 million litre, whatever it was, swimming pool just days before a hose pipe ban. They're desperately trying to paint him as out of touch, sort of billionaire, global elitist, green card holding, non-dom marrying, sort of Tory toff, back to those days. They have to be quite careful with that because it's not necessarily that clear cut. But it's local election season. We're now perhaps 14 months away from a general election, maybe even sooner than that, if the economy continues to pick up at pace. So, you can see the dividing line starting to be drawn, but it's not always that black and white. And actually, what's really interesting, and we speak to our readers a lot. The Sun readers are polled with an inch of their life often to find out what the nation is really thinking. And actually, the first thing that people say about Rishi Sunak, often it isn't he's a millionaire, he's out of touch. It's actually he's Mr. Furlough. He's the guy that actually spent all that money and saved our jobs when the going got tough. And I think Labour know that actually there was a soft spot for Rishi Sunak before he became Prime Minister as Chancellor because of how he handled himself during the COVID pandemic. It's very easy to spend money. It's a lot harder to take it away in tax rises and spending cuts. But I wonder whether actually it's a little bit more complex than just that idea that he's aloof and out of touch. And his personal ratings are ticking up, which is why Labour are going at him so hard.
Yeah, we haven't got time to talk about the attack ads. No doubt we will another week. 14 months? Do you think it's going to be June? Surely later in the year, next year. Anyway.
I don't know. I wouldn't be so sure. Oh. I wouldn't be so sure if I was planning a general election, early next year, I'd tell everyone I thought it was October as well. But Jeremy Hunt let the cat out of the bag a bit in Washington last week when he was asked that very question about, he said we wouldn't go to the country until the economy is looking good. And asked when he thought the economy would be looking good enough, he said about this time next year. So by this time next year, we're going to know we're going to be in election fever either way.
Well, we'll get Jessica's vote on that as well, and also your paper, The Guardian, which has been pushing hard about prepayment meters with news of new guidelines to try to keep these companies in check, Jessica.
Yes, and these new guidelines. Certainly, I think a lot of people tomorrow will be waking up saying that they don't go far enough. So this will be energy suppliers have agreed that they will abide by a ban on forcibly installing these very controversial prepayment meters in the homes of customers over 85, and will also make representatives wear body cams, so that the kind of behaviour we saw in the investigation the Times did, will hopefully then be picked up on by the companies. But those, there was a huge outcry, you'll remember, about the agents using these kind of court-approved entry warrants to break in and install these in the homes of, in sometimes very vulnerable customers, despite apparently having to do a welfare visit before it's installed, and those visits were cursory, to say the least. And I think that there will be, lots of people who say that there's plenty of vulnerable people who are younger than 85. What does this mean for people with disabilities? What does this mean for young families? Is there still going to be these forced installations? And I think that the government may well come under some pressure to make the regulator go further than this.
And your bet for the election next year? I might keep a book.
I think I think that Labour are absolutely convinced it will be May next year, and one of the reasons they are is because they think that the next cycle of local elections is a particularly difficult one for the Tories, and if there is a very, very bad set of local election results, then going into an election in sort of 6 months after that, then things could get very shaky for Rishi Sunak with his party. I don't know if that calculation is quite right, but if you did do a May election and you did and the Tories did a big giveaway budget in March, that would really squeeze the time Labour would have in order to make their own case without the possibility of it being stolen at that budget. So I think Harry's right. I think there's certainly an argument for an election in May. The counter to that is, of course, why would you be Prime Minister for 18 months when you could potentially be Prime Minister for 2 years and deliver more? I mean, that's a weighty counter argument. But I do think it's possible for a spring one next year. Absolutely.
Well, never mind waiting until next year for the economy to get better. Daily Express tells us there are reasons to be cheerful now. The economy is on the mend, Harry. What's the evidence?
Green shoots, I'd say, rather than the economy going gangbusters. But there is consumer confidence appears to be up. Growth forecasts are being revised in the right direction. We're not thinking massive, great stonking growth, but growth nonetheless. Recession has been dodged. I mean, on a technicality, really, we're sort of bumbling along at zero growth and 0.1 and here and 0.2 there. So there is the sort of at least the sort of benefit of not being in a recession. Inflation predicted to start. It has to be, if predictions are being met, it has to start falling pretty soon. Obviously, there was an unexpected little uptick in it last month. So just generally, all the sort of pointers and all the market sort of analysts who try to forecast all this stuff are pretty bullish. So as you say, it feeds into that narrative of when would you go to the country. I think that it'll very different political climate if inflation really is, as the OBR said last year, going to be in sort of back to where it should be at sort of 2% next year. I'll believe it when I see it. I think there's a slight issue that I think we're in what one economist described to me, and I can't say it on television, I've just realised, but how do you call it? A sod-it economy, where people are actually thinking times are pretty tough. I've got a bit of money. I'll just go spend it anyway. And, to hell with the consequences. And they're not saving, they're spending. Now, that sort of artificially can keep inflation quite high. That could be a problem further down the line. But so far, this month, there is a growing feeling that the sort of worst is behind us as in the country. We're waiting to see the sort of data bear that out. But again, that would point to the Tories perhaps being an ability to not necessarily choose when they go to the country, but have the options open to them that actually they could go early. And try and secure Rishi Sunak a legacy of his own.
Jessica, let's go to the Times, shall we? Yet another warning about the threat from China. Who's this from this time?
Yeah, this is from Lindy Cameron, who's the head of the National Cybersecurity Centre, who's saying that the UK and its allies cannot afford complacencies over the dramatic rise of China as a technology superpower. And it's essentially saying that there's no desire from Beijing to collaborate or even to kind of reach parity with Western countries, that it's aiming for this kind of technical supremacy, and that the measure of success will be the strength it uses to sort of achieve a dominant role in global affairs, and basically, essentially the message is that they can't afford to not to sort of keep. The UK can't afford another kind of Western powers can't afford not to try and keep pace with Chinese developments on cybersecurity. Otherwise, we could be chronically left behind. It's one of a number of kind of warnings that have come out about developments in China, the way that Beijing is seeking to dominate this sphere over the past few months.
And many people asking, when you talk about this, how we become less economically reliant on China. Why can't we produce the bits that they produce that our industries need, Harry? And we've seen that recently with the failure of that battery company, that it's not so easy.
Yeah, well, we're playing catch up for essentially what has been probably one of the most serious foreign policy cock ups since Suez, since Iraq, certainly, in the fact that we're paying sort of 15-20 year catch up on the fact that since the late 90s and through the noughties and into this conservative government, you saw a sort of over reliance on China. It wasn't long ago that George Osborne was kowtowing to Beijing. We'll talk of a new golden era, now nicknamed in Whitehall the Golden Era, because we have been left ourselves completely susceptible. We're playing sort of catch up with the Americans as well, and who have been trying to sound the alarm on this for a long time. I think COVID actually really did speed up the sort of reality check for the West, in that what they're dealing with in China. This is a country that lied and obfuscated and still lying about the origins of an outbreak that's killed millions of people around the world. So it's good to see the national security apparatus kicking in, but it's a shame it didn't happen 10 years ago. This is all sort of feeding down from the recently updated integrated review into the sort of strategic threats faced by Britain. That's where the sort of ministers sort of set the sort of direction of travel, and then you'll start to see the sort of security services like the National Cybersecurity Agency, which is an offshoot of GCHQ. You'll see MI5 and MI6, I imagine, making similar noises in the coming months. But Britain stopped short of calling China a strategic threat, our biggest hostile sort of state-based threat. They sort of stopped slightly short of that. Rishi Sunak said it when he was campaigning to be Prime Minister, but won't say it as Prime Minister. So you can see them, they're going quite far on this, but I still think, and I suspect lots of MPs will still think, that Britain could be going harder and firmer and tougher on China, but they don't seem to be willing to do so.
Yeah, sorry to speed you up. Just want to get to the Daily Telegraph, Jessica. Single-sex schools will not be forced to accommodate transgender pupils. These are under government guidelines, expected to be issued within weeks.
Yeah, the Telegraph seems to have seen these guidance on how to treat trans pupils, which was promised at the beginning of the summer term, which has obviously started this week, and it's come after lots of criticisms about the way that schools have handled trans pupils, whether pupils who are in single-sex schools would be able to transition while they're there, and this would give single-sex schools the right to refuse to admit pupils of the other legal sex, which otherwise, might have been seen as a breach of the Equality Act if they did so. And it will also, I think, something again which will be controversial to a lot of sort of young campaigners on this issue, that teachers won't have any requirement to call children by the preferred pronouns that they would like to be identified with, and it's a sort of joint project between Gillian Keegan, the Education Secretary, and the Equalities Minister Kemi Badenoch, who's made it really clear that she's quite interested in the idea of even changing sections of the Equalities Act to give some special definitions around biological sex. As well as just as well as gender. So I think again, this is the Conservatives sort of leaning into this fight, which has, had not particularly edifying language around it on all sides,
Jessica.
frankly.
Sorry, we're running out of time. You didn't choose the coronation quiche either, replete with spinach, broad beans and fresh tarragon. Talk about that soon, no doubt. Both of you, thank you very much indeed. Jessica Elgot-Lego, got it on. Jessica Elgot and Harry Cole, thank you both very much indeed.